Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of Keanu, the first film starring the comedian duo Key and Peele. So I was not entirely sure I wanted to watch this film, at least at this time, even though I did think the previews were pretty damn funny. But personal experiences made the otherwise hilarious trailers somewhat uncomfortable to sit through. The cat in question, Keanu, reminded me way too much of my own cat, Sammy, who tragically died. And I never quite got over that. And the previews were really triggering some negative feelings. And I wasn't entirely sure if I'd be able to view this film objectively, or if I would judge it for very unfair and biased reasons. And the positive reviews only really made me want to distance myself from this movie that much more, because if I watched it and disliked it, that would only draw attention to how it is very possible I'm disliking the movie for the wrong reasons. So I was actually leaning towards seeing Green Room instead, because I actually really want to watch that movie, and I hear it's really good. But I was going to the theaters with my father, and he was not interested in Green Room, and neither of us were interested in watching like Mother's Day. So I just figured, well, he kind of wants to see Keanu. I'll endure it for his sake. So I watched it, and my concerns were at least somewhat justified. I thought Keanu was okay, maybe even pretty good. But I will admit that at times a scene was deflated because of how it surrounded the cat. Whenever they play up the cuteness of Keanu, and certainly this is a very adorable kitten, it would make me sad because, once again, he reminds me so much of Sammy. And for the record, if you don't remember, Sammy did appear in some of my earlier videos. In my critiquing the critics episodes, he was in very prominently in my Mars Girl review, and he had a cameo in my Iron Liz episode. In fact, that was shot shortly before he died. But I think he was also in like the first or second opening. So if you followed my work for quite some time, especially if you're a fan of critiquing the critics, you did see Sammy at one point. But so that aspect, which I'd usually probably praise, just left a bad taste in my mouth for, once again, very unfair reasons. When the cat was in peril, it was just very awkward for me. I would get somewhat annoyed. Even the plot at times made me angry at myself. And that's not something you should ever have to experience while watching any movie, good or bad. So, in that regard, the film was doing nothing wrong. I ended up having issues for very personal and unfair reasons, but that did affect how much I enjoyed the comedy. But with all of that said, I did think Keanu was a consistently amusing movie, and sometimes it was even outright hilarious. Now, I'm not familiar with the works of Key and Peele, although I do know who they are, but now I'm intrigued because they showcased strong screen presence, great chemistry together, and excellent comedic timing. I like how their personalities are similar in all the right ways and yet different in all the right ways. And that just makes their interactions that much more entertaining. And their energy and quirky mannerisms would often redeem an otherwise failed joke. Now, like any comedy, the jokes are either going to be hit or miss. I'd say 70% of them worked on me on at least some level. Some made me laugh out loud, others just made me smile. I won't say that by the end of the movie, my side was hurting from laughing so hard. But like I said, I was consistently amused. But when they are hilarious, they are hilarious. My favorite part in the entire movie was when they're having this debate as to who is the more badass amongst them based on who bullied them in high school. So the argument is the people who kicked my ass was so much tougher than the people who kicked your ass. And to me, that's just clever, absurd, and the comedic timing was dead on. I liked how, yes, there was a lot of awkward fish out of water humor directed at their expense, but I also liked how they would win everyone over within the movie. So they're pretending to be this duo of assassins, but they're not very convincing to us, and yet they actually do trick the people they're infiltrating that they are the real deal. And sometimes they would make the most uncool things actually kind of cool, like you see in the trailer when one of them turns on his favorite song, and it's this corny white person song, and there's that awkward moment where he's like, oh shit, what do I do? And they're like, the fuck is this? And then he starts making it his own, like treating it as if it is the coolest song ever, and eventually they're singing along with them, and all of their performances were just perfect in selling that joke, so I did laugh pretty hard. I liked how the jokes would enter some surreal territory, like with the dream sequence. And I thought the film as a whole was pretty smoothly paced. I was never really bored. Granted, that's just primarily due to me liking the majority of the jokes, but I also need to watch this movie again before I could finalize my feelings in that regard, because a lot of comedies only really work once. The great ones are the ones you could watch over and over again, but I have seen many films that I initially thought were excellent, such as Ted, but when I watch them a second time, because I'm now familiar with all of the jokes, they just don't work on me quite as well, and then I start noticing some real pacing issues, so we'll just have to see. But at least for the first experience, Keanu consistently amused me. As for some of the negatives, the plot is very formulaic, although it does tone down some cliches. Like, for example, most of these films have a falling out amongst the duo, and while there is a scene where there are tensions between them, it doesn't last very long, and it never really continues beyond that. It's just one moment where they're kind of bickering. And sometimes it even outright defies them, but for the most part, you will see everything that's coming a mile away. But still, with a comedy, it can get away with that. But if the jokes don't work for you, then you're only going to pay that much more attention to how familiar this story is, or at least how it plays out. My biggest complaint with this film was the level of violence was intended to be highly stylized, and I think it was supposed to be comical, like a Quentin Tarantino movie or 21 Jump Street, but it didn't really work with me. Whenever there'd be a shootout and people would be getting killed in very graphic ways, I thought it was more awkward and vicious than comedic, and that did kind of disrupt the tone. 21 Jump Street pulled that off a lot better, where that film was arguably even more grotesque, and yet it still made me laugh whenever that violence was happening on screen. But here, whenever there would be some sort of gunfight or just any kind of violent sequence, it would just sort of kill the mood. The most noticeable scene here was when Anna Faris has a cameo, and where that scene leads up to, it just felt once again more suspenseful and, if anything, awkward than funny. And that just sort of, once again, it disrupts the mood. It kills the tone. So there were some legit problems with Keanu, but I did think that it was still a reasonably funny movie that is worth watching at least once, as long as you had a positive reaction to the trailer. If you think it looks funny, then you probably will find this movie to be pretty funny. As for me, once again, my own personal experiences kept me from fully embracing this film. Maybe if the stuff with Sammy had never occurred, I might have been, fully backing this, saying that it's the greatest comedy of the year, that it's just outright hilarious, but unfortunately, I can't do that. And even as is, I did notice some flaws, but considering there was a lot going against this movie for me, I ended up laughing more than I was expecting. So I do think it's worth watching, if only as a rental. But if you did have a strong positive reaction to the trailers, it's probably worth going to the theaters to see as well. So that is all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed this review. I have not really done any major written reviews lately, just lots of mini reviews, so check those out. My next writing will probably be of WWE's Payback. I'm not sure when my next, or what my next full written review will be. So stay tuned, follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and I shall see you guys later.